The
I
air inside
specifically
Loroni didn't
requested the
smell like
Chateau
food.
Margaux, not
It smelled
this
like
Bordeaux.
power wearing
Take
perfume.
it back immediately.
Truffle oil drifted through the room like a signature. Crystal chimed against
I don't care what the
crystal,
menu
kind
says,
of
I'm not
laughter
paying
that
for
never
this.
asked permission.
Take it back immediately.
Soft, expensive, and certain. Rose and fell beneath the low gold glow of chandeliers. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered like a promise made to other people. For Sarah Bennett, it mostly smelled like exhaustion. She adjusted the waistband of her black slacks, one size too big, held together by a safety pin hidden under her apron. The pin pressed into her skin every time she moved, a tiny reminder that she didn't belong to the world she served. Her left arch pulsed with a sharp, needling pain that had been building for 9 hours. Her non-slip shoes, generic and cheap, were coming apart at the seams. The sole had started to peel, just enough that she could feel the floor through it, like the restaurant was slowly eating her alive. Table 4 needs water. ... Sarah didn't look up. Table 7 wants to send the sea base back because it looks sad. ... She didn't blink. Move, Bennett, move. ... The hiss came from Charles Henderson, the floor manager, hovering near the host stand, as if he owned the air. Henderson was the kind of man who believed sweating was a moral failing. He wiped an imaginary smudge from a leather-bound menu and watched the room the way a predator watches tall grass. "On it, Charles," Sarah said. Her voice came out soft, professional, and harmless. An armor made of politeness. She lifted a carafe of iced water and moved with the practiced grace of someone who had learned how to look calm, while her body begged to sit down. To Loroni's patrons, she was not 26 years old. She was not a woman with dark circles hidden under drugstore concealer. She was not a daughter with an alarm set for Sunday train schedules and care facility visiting hours. To them, she was a silhouette in black and white. A hand that refilled glasses, a mouth that recited specials, a body that absorbed complaints. They didn't see the red on her knuckles from hot plates. They didn't see the way she stretched her toes in her shoes when no one was looking, trying to convince the pain to leave. And they certainly didn't know that 3 years ago, Sarah Bennett had been a doctoral candidate in comparative linguistics at the Sorbonne, one of the brightest minds in her cohort, the kind of student professors remembered. That life felt like a photograph left in the sun too long. VIPs, Henderson snapped again, voice sharpening. Walking in, table 1, best view, don't mess this up, ... Sarah's grip tightened on the carafe. She turned toward the heavy oak doors and saw Kevin, the teenage host, smoothing his tie with trembling fingers as a couple entered. The man walked in first, which told Sarah everything she needed to know. He was tall, dressed in a navy bespoke suit that fit a little too tight across the shoulders, as if to emphasize that he could afford a trainer. His face was the kind of handsome that belonged in magazines, but cruel in motion. Sharp jaw, eyes that scanned the room not to admire it, but to measure who was watching him. Harrison Sterling. Sarah recognized the name from the receipts. Hedge fund manager. Headlines. Hostile takeovers. New money dressed like old money, trying to wear dignity like a tailored coat. A woman followed him, a deep red dress, beautiful and expensive, but her posture was closed. Arms crossed. Breath held. She looked like someone bracing for impact. Kevin bowed slightly. "Right this way, Mr. Sterling." ... Harrison didn't acknowledge the boy. He strode to table 1 by the window, the prime seat overlooking the city lights, and sat down the way kings claim thrones, legs wide, shoulders back, making sure the space understood it belonged to him now. Sarah took a breath that didn't reach her lungs. Rent was due Tuesday. Her father's physical therapy was non-negotiable. Her life was balanced on tips and thin hope. She walked to the table and composed her face into the pleasant mask she wore like survival. "Good evening," Sarah said, voice soft, steady. "Welcome to Loroni. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." ... Harrison didn't look at her face. He inspected the silverware instead, turning a fork under the light, as if searching for a flaw he could punish. "Sparkling water," he said to the fork. "And bring the reserve wine list, not the one you give tourists, ... "Of course, sir." Sarah replied. She glanced to the woman. And for you, miss? Quote dot. The woman offered the smallest apologetic smile. Still water, please. Thank you. Quote dot. Harrison finally looked up. His gaze landed on Sarah's shoes first, then moved up to her hands, raw from heat, red at the edges. A sneer curled like a private joke. He had placed her in the hierarchy of his world at 0. Wait, Harrison said as Sarah turned away. Yes, sir? Quote dot. Make sure the glass is actually clean this time. His voice was loud enough for the neighboring table to hear. Last time I was here, the stemware was foggy. It's hard to get good help these days, isn't it? Quote dot. A thin heat crawled up Sarah's neck. She kept her expression blank. I will personally inspect the glasses, sir. Quote dot. Harrison dismissed her with a wave, as if swatting a fly. As Sarah walked away, she heard his dry laugh and then his voice dropping toward the woman in red. Jessica, though Sarah didn't know her name yet. You have to be firm with them, he said. Otherwise, they walk all over you. It's a power dynamic. You wouldn't understand. Quote dot. Sarah reached the service station and steadied her hands on the counter. The room behind her kept breathing, clinking, murmuring, glittering, while something inside her quietly tightened, like a knot pulled 1 inch closer to snapping. Because men like Harrison Sterling didn't come to dinner for food. They came to feed something else. And tonight, he was hungry. And then, the reserve list felt heavier than it should have. Sarah balanced the leather-bound folder against her forearm as she crossed the dining room, moving through a maze of linen and low voices. The tables near the windows shimmered with candlelight, their reflections multiplying in glass like an audience that never blinked. Somewhere behind her, Henderson's presence pressed into the room like weather. At table 1, Harrison Sterling had already settled into himself. He sat with his jacket unbuttoned, wrist angled, just enough for his watch to catch the light. Jessica sat opposite him, her hands folded in her lap, eyes moving between the window and the table, as if calculating how long the night might last. Sarah placed the reserve list in front of Harrison. May I take your appetizer order, sir? Quote dot. Harrison didn't open the menu. He leaned back and stretched his arms along the back of his chair, occupying more space than his body required. Foie gras, he said, and something interesting for her. Surprise her. Quote dot. Jessica lifted her head slightly. A salad is fine, actually. Quote dot. Harrison waved a dismissive hand. Trust me, you'll like what I order. Quote dot. Sarah nodded. Foie gras for you, and a salade lyonnaise for the lady. Quote dot. She turned to go. Wait. Quote dot. She stopped. And the wine, Harrison said. Bring me something that doesn't insult me. Quote dot. Sarah met his eyes briefly, then looked down at the list. May I suggest the 2015 Chateau Margaux? It pairs well with the duck later, if you plan to order it. Quote dot. Harrison's mouth curved in what might have been approval or might have been strategy. Do that. Quote dot. She retrieved the bottle from the cellar, cradling it like something breakable and sacred. At the service station, she cut the foil, eased the cork free, and lifted it to her nose. Clean. Dry. Perfect. She poured a small measure into a tasting glass and inhaled again. Blackcurrant. Cedar. Nothing wrong. When she returned to table 1, the appetizers were already in her other hand, the heavy tray balanced on her shoulder. She set the foie gras in front of Harrison and the salad before Jessica. Enjoy, she said, and lifted the bottle to pour. Harrison raised a finger. She paused. He swirled the wine in his glass, sniffed it with theatrical concentration, and frowned. It's corked, he announced. The word fell into the room like a challenge. Sarah's hand tightened around the bottle. I opened it moments ago, sir, she said carefully. The cork was sound. It may need a moment to breathe. Quote dot. Harrison slammed his palm on the table. The silverware jumped. Jessica flinched. A nearby conversation stalled mid-sentence. Are you arguing with me? Harrison asked, voice sharpening. I said it's corked. Do you know how much wine I buy? Do you know who I am? Quote dot. His eyes flicked toward the neighboring table, then back to Sarah. I don't need a waitress with a discount store accent lecturing me about Bordeaux. Quote dot. He wasn't speaking to her anymore. He was speaking to the room. Sarah felt the heat climb her neck again, but she kept her spine straight. I will fetch the sommelier immediately, sir. Quote dot. No, Harrison smiled, thin and precise. Don't bother him with this. He has important tables. Take it back. And bring me the menu again. I've lost my appetite for the foie gras. It looks rubbery. Quote dot. She lifted the plate. She took the glass. She turned away. In the kitchen, Henry dipped a spoon into the returned sauce and tasted it. Imbecile, he muttered in French. The texture is perfect. Quote dot. He wants a reaction, Sarah said, leaning against the stainless steel counter. That's all. Quote dot. Henry glanced toward the swinging doors. Henderson is watching. If Sterling complains, you will be the apology. Quote dot. She nodded. She needed this job. Not because she loved it, but because it paid in weeks what other places paid in months. Every tip was a pill bottle. Every shift was a therapy session. Her life was measured in nights survived. When she returned with the menu, Harrison looked pleased with himself. Jessica met Sarah's eyes and mouthed, I'm sorry. Sarah gave the smallest nod. So, Harrison said, flipping the menu without reading, I want something authentic tonight, but these English descriptions are so dull. They lack soul. Quote dot. He smirked. Tell me, do you speak French? Quote dot. This is a French restaurant, sir, Sarah replied. I know the menu items. Quote dot. The menu items, he echoed. Bonjour, baguette, oui, oui. That's about the extent of it for someone like you, I assume. Quote dot. I can help you with any questions. Quote dot. I doubt it. Quote dot. He leaned toward Jessica. Watch this. You can always tell the quality of a place by the education of the staff. Quote dot. Then he turned back to Sarah and inhaled, as if preparing for a performance. And when he spoke again, it was not English. It was French. Fast, archaic, thick, with exaggerated vowels and borrowed slang. A dialect meant to confuse. A language wielded like a whip. He finished and folded his arms. Do you understand? He asked. Or am I speaking too fast for your little brain? Quote dot. He waited for the stumble, for the apology, for the manager. Sarah stood still. The dining room blurred at the edges. Behind his voice, she heard another sound, the echo of lecture halls, chalk on blackboards, professors arguing over verbs older than nations. Harrison had chosen a weapon. He didn't know she had forged it first. Until, for 3 seconds, the restaurant did not exist. The clink of cutlery, the murmur of moneyed conversations, the soft music breathing through hidden speakers, all of it faded into a distant fog. What remained was Harrison Sterling's voice, sharp and theatrical, curling around syllables he believed were keys to a locked door. Sarah heard every word. Not as noise, as meaning. He had asked for duck with skin, crispy like glass, and another bottle of wine that did not taste like vinegar. He had wrapped the request in an antique French dialect riddled with mistakes and vanity, the way a child wraps a stone in gold paper and calls it treasure. He waited for her to blink, for her to confess ignorance, for her to shrink into the role he had prepared. Jessica looked down at her lap, her shoulders tight. She already knew how this would end. Another small humiliation, another laugh he would call charm. Harrison tilted his head, smiling. Well, quote dot. Sarah did not reach for her notepad. She did not look toward Henderson. She straightened. Something inside her shifted, like a door opening that had not been used in years. The pain in her feet receded into the background. The safety pin at her waist disappeared. The room returned, not as an enemy, but as an audience. When she spoke, it was not the soft service voice she had been trained to use. It was lower, calmer, anchored. She answered him in French. Not the French of menus and memorized phrases. The French of dissertations and arguments. The French of halls where people were paid to disagree with you. Her vowels were precise. Her consonants clean. Sir, she said in his own chosen language, if you intend to impress me with the imperfect subjunctive, I would recommend revising your conjugations. You have confused the conditional with a construction that went out of fashion before the Revolution. ... Harrison's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Sarah continued, her tone polite in the way professors were polite when they meant to dismantle you. Your request for duck is noted. However, comparing its skin to glass is a clumsy metaphor, generally reserved for inferior 19th-century poetry. As for the wine, she glanced at the rejected glass. It is not vinegar. It is a 2015 Chateau Margaux. The acidity you perceive is the signature of young tannins, which require an educated palate to appreciate. If that is too complex, I would be delighted to bring you a sweet Merlot, something more in line with your preferences. ... Silence fell, not awkward silence. Heavy silence, the kind that presses against the ears. At the next table, an elderly man lowered his newspaper. A busboy stood frozen with a pitcher in his hands. Even Henderson stopped polishing menus 20 feet away, sensing a disturbance in the ecosystem. Harrison's face drained of certainty. He understood perhaps half of what she had said, but he understood the shape of it. He had been corrected. Publicly. Elegantly. In the very language he had chosen to dominate her with. His mouth opened, then closed. The French words abandoned him. Switching back to English would mean surrender. He had started the game. He could not end it without losing. A sound broke the tension. A small, sharp giggle. Jessica clamped her hand over her mouth too late. Her eyes widened in horror at herself, but something else was there too. Relief. Light. The first unguarded expression of the night. Sarah turned to her and inclined her head. Madame. ... Then she turned back to Harrison and switched to English as easily as stepping across a line. I will place the order for the duck, sir, she said calmly, and I will bring the Merlot. I think you'll find it easier to swallow. ... She pivoted away from the table, her movements controlled, her back straight. She did not hurry. Behind her, Harrison Sterling sat among crystal and candlelight, with nothing left to say. The ghost of her French lingered in the air like perfume. When she reached the service corridor, the strength left her all at once. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the granite counter, breath coming in short, uneven bursts. Her hands shook so hard the empty glasses on her tray rattled like teeth. What have I done? The thought struck like cold water. She had not just answered him. She had challenged him. Pride did not pay for medication. Conjugation did not cover rent. Victory did not guarantee employment. Bennett. ... Anderson's voice was low and dangerous. She closed her eyes before turning. Henderson stood there, face pale, eyes darting toward table, one where Harrison was now violently typing into his phone. What did you say to him? Henderson whispered. He ordered in French. Sarah replied, her voice barely steady. I answered in French. ... I don't speak French, Henderson snapped, but I know what an insult sounds like. That man is worth $400 million Sioux dollars. He brings clients here 3 times a week. ... I corrected his grammar, Sarah said, and told him the wine was too complex for him. ... For half a second, admiration flickered across Henderson's face. Then, fear crushed it. You have a death wish, he hissed. Stay in the back. Send Kevin to that table. If Sterling demands to see me, you're done. ... Sarah nodded. She had stepped onto something she could not step off, and the floor beneath her was already shifting. Because the kitchen was louder than the dining room, but it felt safer. Pans hissed. Orders were shouted. Steam rose in white clouds that erased faces and softened edges. Here, no one pretended to be elegant. Heat did not care about status. Fire treated everyone the same. Sarah took the basket of silverware from the dish pit and found a narrow corner beside the prep table. She wrapped a cloth around a fork and began to polish. One fork, then another. The motion was mechanical, almost meditative. Rub. Turn. Check for spots. Repeat. Her hands still trembled. The image of Harrison's face, red, confused, suddenly small, kept replaying in her mind. She had seen something crack in him. Not anger, not shame, control. But the satisfaction was thin and brief. Because pride did not pay for care facilities. She thought of the train north every Sunday morning, the smell of disinfectant, the sound of wheels in the hallway, her father's room with its single window and its slow, patient clock. Thomas Bennett had once built cabinets so perfectly that the corners looked carved from one piece of wood. He had raised her alone after her mother died, hands rough, voice gentle. He had never understood her love of languages, but he had loved her love of them. "My girl is going to be a doctor," he used to tell people. "Not the kind with needles," he would add proudly. "The kind that knows things." Quote, dot. Then the stroke came. A ladder, a fall, a silence where words had lived. And then the bills. The world did not care that she had been studying semantic drift in post-revolutionary France. The world only cared that care cost money, and money came from trays and patience and swallowing insults from men who wore watches worth more than her childhood home. Sarah scrubbed a fork too hard, her knuckle went white. She had traded libraries for linen, arguments for appetizers, the Sorbonne for subway stations. And tonight, for 30 seconds, she had been herself again. A dangerous thing. "Bennett!" Quote, dot. Henderson's voice cut through the heat like a blade. She looked up. He stood near the swinging doors, arms crossed, his face set in the expression he used when something expensive might break. "Stay back here," he said. "Do not go near table 1. Kevin will handle them." Quote, dot. "I understand." Quote, dot. "If Sterling complains, I can't protect you." Quote, dot. "I understand." Quote, dot. He hesitated, then added more quietly, "Don't make this worse." Quote, dot. Worse than what? She thought. Worse than being invisible? Worse than being accused of stupidity for existing? But she said nothing. She polished. Time passed in small metallic circles. Then the sound changed. Not the rhythm of orders. Not the crash of pans. A voice. Raised. Sharp. Angry. It came from the dining room. Sarah felt it before she heard her name. Sarah. Quote, dot. Kevin appeared in the doorway, pale and breathless. The tie he had smoothed earlier now hung crooked at his throat. "What is it?" she asked, already knowing it was not nothing. "It's table 1, he whispered. "Mr. Sterling, he's asking for you." Quote, dot. Her stomach tightened. "What for?" Quote, dot. Kevin swallowed. He says you stole his card." Quote, dot. The fork slipped from her fingers and hit the metal table with a sound too loud for such a small object. "My what?" Quote, dot. "His black card. He says he left it on the table when he went to the restroom, and now it's gone." Quote, dot. The room tilted. "He says you were the only one near the table," Kevin continued. "He's shouting. He wants the manager. He says he's calling the police." Quote, dot. The word landed like a sentence. Police meant reports. Reports meant records. Records meant no more jobs, no more income, no more checks sent north, no more therapy, no more medicine. "He's lying," Sarah said. Kevin nodded quickly. "I know. I saw him put it in his jacket pocket earlier. But he's making a scene. Everyone is filming. Quote, dot. Sarah closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Harrison had lost face, so now he wanted blood. Not a joke, not a remark, a ruin. If she stayed in the kitchen, she looked guilty. If she went out, she walked into a trial without a judge. She untied her apron. Her hands were steady now, not because she was brave, because fear had run out of places to hide. "Where is Henderson?" she asked. "Out there," Kevin said, trying to calm him down. Quote, dot. Sarah tied the apron again, tighter this time. Armor. She thought of her father's eyes when he could not find words. She thought of how he had taught her to stand straight when things were wrong. "Okay," she said. She walked toward the swinging doors and stepped back into the air of truffle and cameras and accusation. When? The dining room had changed shape. What had once been a cathedral of quiet wealth was now a circle. People did not move closer, but their attention did. Their bodies leaned back in chairs while their eyes leaned forward. Phones were raised like small, glowing shields. The chandeliers no longer felt warm. They felt surgical. Harrison Sterling stood near table 1 with his jacket open and his voice turned up. "I leave my card for 2 minutes," he announced, loud enough for the windows to hear. And suddenly it's gone. Amazing how that works. Quote, dot. Charles Henderson stood beside him, sweating through his collar, nodding too much and too often. "Mr. Sterling, please," Henderson said. "Let's lower our voices." "No," Harrison pointed at the table. "This is a serious accusation. This place is a den of thieves." Quote, dot. Jessica sat frozen in her chair, hands pressed together, eyes fixed on the tablecloth. She looked smaller than she had all night. Sarah stepped through the swinging doors and into the light. Every head turned. Harrison saw her first, his mouth curved in a smile that did not belong to happiness. "There she is," he said. "The thief." Quote, dot. The words struck the room like a glass dropped from height. Sarah walked forward. She did not look at the phones. She did not look at Henderson. She looked only at Harrison. "I did not take your card," she said. Her voice was calm. "And you know that." Quote, dot. Harrison laughed. "Oh, I know what I saw. You were hovering around the table. You saw the watch. You saw the card. You people always do." Quote, dot. "You people" landed harder than thief. Quote, dot. "I opened your wine," Sarah said. "I brought your food. I took your plate back. I did my job." Quote, dot. "And then my card vanished." Harrison stepped closer, invading the space she had carved out with her stillness. "Funny how timing works." Quote, dot. He looked around the room. "Search her." Quote, dot. A murmur passed through the crowd. "She probably has it in her pocket right now," he continued. "Go on. Empty them." Quote, dot. Sarah did not move. "If you don't," Harrison said, "I call the NYPD and they strip search you in the back of a squad car." Quote, dot. Silence. This was not a misunderstanding anymore. This was theater. Harrison was not looking for the card. He was looking for control. Henderson shifted from foot to foot. "Mr. Sterling, we can handle this quietly." "No," Harrison snapped. "I want witnesses." Quote, dot. He looked back at Sarah. "Your choice, sweetheart. Pockets. Now." Quote, dot. Sarah felt the eyes on her like weight. If she emptied her pockets, she submitted. If she refused, she became the story. She thought of her father's room with its quiet clock. She thought of the medication schedule taped to the wall. She thought of the train tickets folded in her drawer. She thought of the word thief following her like a shadow into every future interview. "I did not take your card," she said again. Harrison leaned closer. "Then prove it." Quote, dot. "I don't have to," Sarah replied. That surprised even her. "I don't have to prove I didn't steal something you lost." Quote, dot. Harrison's smile sharpened. "Oh, but you do." "Because I say so." Quote, dot. A voice broke through the tension. "That will be enough." Quote, dot. It did not shout. It did not rush. It simply arrived. From the corner of the room, table 4, a chair scraped softly against the floor. An older man stood up. He wore a tweed jacket that looked worn but deliberate. His hair was silver, his posture straight. He had been nursing a single glass of cognac and reading a folded newspaper for most of the evening. No one had noticed him. Until now, Harrison turned. "Who are you?" "Dot." The man did not answer immediately. He walked forward at a measured pace, as if time obeyed him. He stopped beside Sarah, not in front of her. "I believe," the man said, "that you are mistaken, Mr. Sterling." "Dot." Harrison sneered. "Mind your business, Grandpa." "Dot." The man's eyes moved to Sarah. He gave her the smallest nod. Then he looked back at Harrison. "And I believe," he continued, "that if you check the inside pocket of your jacket, the left one, you will find your American Express card." Dot. Harrison's hand twitched. "I didn't put it there," he snapped. "Check," the man said. It was not a suggestion. Harrison hesitated. Cameras shifted toward him. The room leaned. With an angry scowl, he shoved his hand into the inside pocket of his jacket. His face went blank. Slowly, he pulled his hand out. Between his fingers was the black titanium card. A gasp rippled through the room. The man inclined his head slightly. "A miracle," he said. "Either the laws of physics have been suspended, or you have lied." Dot. Harrison's mouth opened. Closed. Sarah exhaled for the first time in minutes. But the night was not finished with him yet, because the man in tweed was not done speaking. And the card lay in Harrison Sterling's hand like evidence. Black, heavy, indisputable. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the phones seemed to hesitate, their lenses caught between two stories. The one that had been announced, and the one that had just collapsed. Harrison's face flushed a violent shade of red. "I must have," he began. "Forgotten where you placed it?" The older man finished calmly. "Yes, that is one possibility." Dot. The man turned slightly, so that his body formed a quiet barrier between Sarah and Harrison. Not a dramatic gesture, a deliberate one. "Or," he continued, "you attempted to destroy a woman's livelihood because she corrected your French." Dot. A low murmur spread through the room. Heads tilted. The story was being rewritten in real time. Harrison straightened his jacket, trying to recover the posture he had lost. "This is absurd," he said. "I made a mistake, that's all. No need for a spectacle." Dot. "You created the spectacle," the man replied. "You only object now that it no longer favors you." Dot. Harrison's jaw tightened. "And who exactly are you to lecture me?" Dot. The man smiled faintly. "I am Lucien Valmont." Dot. The name did not echo loudly. It didn't need to. Harrison's expression changed instantly, not into fear at first, but into recognition. The kind that comes when memory finds a file it did not expect to open. "Valmont," he repeated. "As in Valmont International?" Dot. "The same." Dot. The silence deepened. Jessica looked up for the first time in minutes. Henderson stopped moving altogether. Harrison laughed once, thin and brittle. "This is ridiculous. You're threatening me over a misunderstanding in a restaurant?" Dot. Lucien Valmont took a phone from his pocket. "I am not threatening you," he said. "I am correcting a risk." Dot. He glanced at the screen. "Sterling Capital's leverage is underwritten by our Zurich bank. 60% of it, to be precise." Dot. Harrison's breath stuttered. Lucien raised the phone to his ear. "I think," he said, "that tonight would be a good night to call in those loans." Dot. "No," Harrison said quickly. "No, you can't do that over this." Dot. Lucien looked at him. "I can do it because I do not trust men who confuse power with cruelty." Dot. The room held its breath. Lucien lowered the phone and turned to Sarah. "Madam," he said, "your analysis of the wine was correct. The 2015 Margaux requires patience. It is not for those who rush to judgment. Sarah felt something inside her chest unlock. Thank you, she said quietly. Harrison's voice cracked. Jessica, let's go. He reached for her arm. Jessica stood up. No, she said. Harrison froze. What? I'm not leaving with you. Her voice trembled, but it did not retreat. Not after this. She turned to Sarah. I'm sorry. I should have stopped him earlier. Then she turned back to Harrison. You don't need a woman. You need an audience. Harrison looked around. No one was watching him anymore. They were watching her. He said nothing more. He walked out. The doors closed behind him, with a sound that felt like punctuation. Applause rose. Not thunderous, but sincere. Sarah didn't hear it. She was looking at Lucien Valmont. The name stirred something old in her memory. Not finance. Footnotes. Foundations. Valmont, she said slowly. The Valmont Foundation? Lucien's eyes brightened. Ah, so you do remember. You fund linguistic research, she said. Yes. She swallowed. I was at the Sorbonne. Lucien's gaze sharpened. Sarah Bennett. Her breath caught. I read your thesis, he said. Semantic Architecture of Silence. We were preparing to award you the Geneva Fellowship before you disappeared. I had to leave, Sarah said. My father. I know, Lucien said gently. We tried to find you. The dining room seemed very far away now. What are you doing here? Sarah asked. Lucien smiled. Looking for you, perhaps. He held out a simple business card. Come see me on Monday, he said. We have much to discuss. Sarah took the card with hands that still trembled. Not from fear now. From possibility. Behind her, Henderson was already rewriting his loyalty. The restaurant was returning to motion. But Sarah remained still. Because in one evening, her past had found her present. And her future had just stepped out of a shadow. Therefore, the dining room slowly remembered how to breathe. Chairs slid back into place. Glasses were lifted again. Conversations restarted in careful fragments, as if everyone were afraid the moment might shatter if spoken too loudly. Loroni returned to being expensive and beautiful, but something invisible had changed its temperature. Sarah still stood where Lucien Valmont had left her. The business card felt heavier than paper. Sarah! Henderson appeared at her side with the urgency of a man who smelled new weather. That was extraordinary. I had no idea you knew Mr. Valmont. I didn't, Sarah said. Not personally. Well, you must have some connection. We should have known. We could have handled this differently. He lowered his voice. Take the rest of the night off. Paid. Actually, take the week off. We value you here. Sarah looked at him. Not with anger, with clarity. You are going to let the police search me, she said. Henderson smiled weakly. We were de-escalating. You were abandoning me. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Please, he said. Don't make this harder. Sarah untied her apron. The knot resisted for a second, then came loose. The fabric slid from her waist like a skin she no longer needed. I'm not making it harder, she said. I'm making it honest. She folded the apron carefully and placed it on the service counter. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Henderson nodded once. Take your time, he said, already retreating. Sarah walked past the tables, past the candles and the reflections of wealth in glass. She pushed through the oak doors and into the night. The city outside felt colder than the restaurant. Taxi horns cut the air. Steam rose from the street. The sky was black and patient. She stood on the sidewalk with the card in her hand and her coat half-buttoned. Lucien Valmont, director of foundations, chair of boards, reader of her forgotten words. Her phone vibrated. It was the care facility. Her heart leapt before she answered. Yes. Ms. Bennett, the nurse said gently. Your father is stable tonight. He was restless earlier, but he's asleep now. Thank you, Sarah whispered. She ended the call and leaned her head back against the cool stone wall of the building. Stable meant expensive. Asleep meant tomorrow still existed. She looked at the card again. Valmont Foundation. Manhattan. A door. Not a miracle. A door. But doors demanded courage, too. The subway ride home felt longer than usual. She sat between strangers, her reflection in the dark window wearing someone else's future. Her shoes hurt less than they had earlier. Or perhaps she had simply learned to ignore them. In her apartment in Queens, she turned on the small lamp and sat on the edge of her bed. Her roommates were out. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She opened the drawer beneath her mattress. Inside was a stack of papers tied with twine. Her thesis. The pages were worn, corners folded, margins dense with ink. She untied the string and flipped through them slowly. Words she had once believed would change the world. She read the first line aloud, softly, as if testing whether it still belonged to her. It did. Her phone buzzed again. A message. Unknown number. This is Lucien Valmont. I hope you arrived home safely. Monday, 9 a.m. Do not be late. We have much work to do. She stared at the screen. Then she laughed. Once. Short. Uncertain. Tomorrow would be different. Not easier, but different. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Harrison Sterling would wake up tomorrow furious and humiliated. Jessica would wake up free. Lucien Valmont would wake up powerful. And she would wake up with a choice. For 3 years, her life had been a hallway with no doors. Tonight, someone had knocked a hole in the wall. And light had come through. So, Monday morning did not look like a miracle. It looked like rain. Gray clouds hung low over Manhattan, flattening the skyline into a watercolor of steel and glass. Sarah stood outside the Valmont Foundation building with her coat buttoned too high and her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. The building did not announce itself with gold or marble. It was quiet. Stone. Glass. Light. A place that did not need to prove anything. She checked the address on the card for the 3rd time. Then she went inside. The lobby smelled like books and lemon polish. Sunlight filtered through tall windows and rested on rows of shelves lining the walls. Ancient spines. Leather. Paper that had survived wars. A young man with dark hair and careful glasses looked up from the desk. Sarah Bennett? ? Yes. ... I'm David. Mr. Valmont is expecting you. ... He led her down a hallway that felt like a corridor through time. Portraits of scholars and explorers hung beside maps drawn when oceans were still guesses. The floor did not echo. It absorbed sound as if it respected thinking. Lucien Valmont stood near a long table covered with manuscripts. Punctual, he said. Good. Sarah removed her coat and folded it over the chair he indicated. You look different without an apron, he added. She smiled faintly. I feel different. ... Sit, he said. We will speak plainly. ... She sat. Lucien did not open with apologies or compliments. He slid a folder toward her. Inside were photocopies of letters. Ink faded, handwriting frantic, sentences folded into themselves. 18th century France, he said. Private correspondence of aristocratic families during the Terror. Millions of words, most unread. We are digitizing and translating them. Quote dot. Sarah touched the page carefully. This is enormous. Quote dot. Yes, and dangerous. Quote dot. She looked up. Dangerous? Quote dot. Language hides fear, Lucien said. In these letters, people were choosing words carefully because words could kill. I need someone who can tell me when silence means hope and when it means terror. Quote dot. Her throat tightened. This is what I studied. Quote dot. I know, he said. That is why you are here. Quote dot. She exhaled slowly. I can't leave New York. Quote dot. I do not require you to. Quote dot. My father is in a facility upstate. Quote dot. I know, Lucien replied. St. Jude's Neurological Institute, 40 minutes by train. Quote dot. Sarah's breath caught. They won't take Medicaid. Quote dot. They will take my insurance, Lucien said, which will be yours. Quote dot. He slid another page from the folder. A contract. Salary. Benefits. Medical. Transportation allowance. Her eyes blurred at the number. Why? She asked. Why me? Quote dot. Lucien leaned back. Because last week, a man tried to erase you with money, he said, and you erased him with grammar. That told me everything I needed to know about your spine. Quote dot. She laughed despite herself. You will direct our archival interpretation division, he continued. Not manage people, interpret meaning. Quote dot. Sarah closed the folder gently. I will need time. Quote dot. You have it, Lucien said, but not much. Minds like yours rust when left unused. Quote dot. She nodded. That afternoon she took the train north. The care facility smelled of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. Her father sat by the window in his wheelchair, staring at nothing in particular. Hi, Dad, she said. He turned his head slowly. His mouth worked. No word came out. She took his hand. I have news, she whispered. I think I can bring you somewhere better. Quote dot. His eyes focused. Not fully, but enough. The nurse watched them quietly. That night, Sarah returned to Queens and packed one box. Books she had hidden from herself, notebooks she had not opened. A future she had folded small to survive. Tomorrow she would sign, not because she was saved, but because she was ready. Meanwhile, the paperwork did not look like justice. It looked like folders. White pages, black ink, signatures in places marked with small, obedient lines. Sarah sat at the long table in the Valmont Foundation office, with a pen that felt too heavy in her hand. Lucien watched from across the table, his expression unreadable in the way of men who were used to decisions becoming real only after they were written down. She signed her name once, then again, and again. Each time the letters felt less like a promise and more like a return. Welcome, Lucien said simply. David appeared with a small box. Your ID badge, he said, and your access code. You'll want to begin with the correspondence from 1793. They are unsettled. Quote dot. Sarah nodded. That afternoon, a different set of documents was signed. Hospital transfers. Insurance authorizations. Transport schedules. The care facility upstate did not protest. They simply confirmed the date. Wednesday. Her father would be moved to St. Jude's Neurological Institute. When she called the nurse's station, her voice shook. Is this really happening? She asked. Yes, Ms. Bennett, the nurse replied. We have received the approval. Quote dot. Sarah closed her eyes and let the sound of it settle. Approval. A word that had always belonged to other people. That night, she received a message from an unknown number. Sterling Capital announces emergency restructuring after sudden withdrawal of major credit line. She read it twice. Then a third time. Lucia had not spoken of Harrison again. He had not needed to. Power did not argue. It adjusted. By Wednesday morning, the ambulance was waiting outside the facility when Sarah arrived. Her father's wheelchair was newer. His jacket was clean. The nurse who handed him over smiled at Sarah with something like relief. "He's been more responsive lately," she said. "We think it's the consistency of therapy." Sarah crouched in front of him. "Dad," she said softly, "we're going somewhere better." He blinked. His fingers moved slightly against the armrest. The ride to St. Jude's was quiet. Outside the window, trees passed in long, green sentences. Inside, the hum of the engine felt like a heartbeat that belonged to both of them. The building did not smell like fear. It smelled like coffee and soap and something faintly floral. A doctor with kind eyes explained the schedule: physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. Every day. "He will be tired," the doctor said, "but tired is a good sign." Sarah nodded. When the nurse wheeled her father into the room, he looked at her. His mouth moved. It took time. "Saw." The sound was rough, unfinished, but real. Sarah felt the room tilt. She pressed her forehead gently to his. "I'm here," she whispered. Back in Manhattan, her new office waited. The desk was wide and scarred with the marks of past work. Sunlight fell across stacks of fragile letters. She put her bag down and touched the first page. Ink from 1794. Fear from another century. Language that had tried to hide itself. David stood in the doorway. "Director Bennett?" She looked up. The title did not frighten her. "Yes." "We've received the first batch of scans." "Bring them," she said. The work was slow. It required listening to what was not said, to pauses, to altered verbs, to polite phrases that meant goodbye. She stayed late, not because she had to, because the words wanted her. At night, she took the train north. Her father slept more, but when he was awake, his eyes followed her. Once, when she was leaving, he lifted his hand. "Proud," he said. The word was still broken. But it stood. The city kept moving. Sterling capital shrank. Jessica disappeared from headlines. Laroni filled its tables again, but somewhere beneath the surface, something had shifted. Not a man, a pattern. The idea that humiliation could be a strategy. It could not. Not anymore. Because systems were only powerful until someone learned how to speak to them. And Sarah Bennett had found her voice again. At last. 6 months later, the library of the Valmont Foundation had learned Sarah's footsteps. They were quiet, measured, familiar. Dust motes drifted through the tall windows like slow snowfall, settling on leather-bound spines that had survived revolutions and fires. The room smelled of paper and time. Sarah sat at the long mahogany table with a magnifying glass in one hand and a letter from 1794 in the other, tracing the nervous curve of a sentence written by a man waiting to be arrested. She did not read it for its facts. She read it for what it feared to say. "Director Bennett," David said softly from the doorway. "Yes?" "The translation of the Mercy correspondence is ready for your review." "Bring it." She set the magnifier down and leaned back slightly, her blazer fitting where her apron once hung. Her shoes did not hurt. Her back did not ache in the way it used to. Pain had not disappeared from her life, but it had lost its authority. A shadow crossed the glass wall of her office. Sarah looked up. A wheelchair stood in the lobby. And in it, a man who once built cabinets with hands that could measure angles by touch alone. "Dad?" she said, already standing. The nurse smiled. He insisted on surprising you. Quote, dot. Sarah crossed the hallway and knelt in front of him. Is everything okay? She asked. Thomas Bennett looked at her. His eyes were clearer now. Stronger. He lifted his left hand and rested it on her shoulder. The muscles of his mouth worked slowly, carefully, as if each movement were a decision. S. Sa. Ra. Quote, dot. The word was rough, but it was complete. Sarah froze. It was the first time he had said her name since the stroke. Dad, she whispered. He swallowed and tried again. Proud, he said. The syllable was still imperfect, but the meaning was not. She wrapped her arms around him and pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing in the smell of soap and clean cotton instead of disinfectant. For a long moment, the world narrowed to the space between two people who had survived each other. Lucien Valmont watched from a respectful distance. You see, he said later, when Sarah returned to her desk with red eyes and steady hands, language is not just sound, it is return. Quote, dot. She nodded. Across the city, life had continued. Leroni still served foie gras to people who believed taste was proof of worth. Henderson had learned to smile differently. Kevin had learned to look people in the eye. Jessica had opened a small gallery with her father and stopped answering questions about a man whose name now appeared in business sections, with words like liquidation and loss. Harrison Sterling still owned Suits. He no longer owned certainty. Sarah did not think of him often. She thought of letters written in fear and read in safety. She thought of verbs that once hid meaning and now revealed it. She thought of the night a man tried to erase her with money and failed, because money could buy space. It could buy silence. It could buy fear. But it could not buy grammar. It could not buy dignity. And it could not buy the moment when a daughter heard her name again. That night, after her father was taken back to St. Jude's, Sarah stayed late. She translated one final letter. The last line read, If I survive, I will speak plainly. She wrote the translation beneath it and closed the folder. Outside, Manhattan moved like a living paragraph. She turned off the lamp and stood by the window for a moment, looking down at the street where taxis slid past like commas. Once, she had served food to people who believed they owned the world. Now, she served meaning to time. And somewhere between those two lives, she had learned the most important grammar of all, that power is loud. But truth is precise. And when truth finally speaks, it does not need to shout. It only needs to be heard. Forever.